From Austin Film Festival, this is On Story, a look inside the creative process from today's leading writers, creators, and filmmakers. I'm your host, Barbara Morgan. This week on Story, we're joined by writer-producer Susan Soon He Stanton for a conversation about her work as a staff writer on the Emmy-winning drama series Succession. Succession centers on the Roy family, the ultra-rich owners of a global media conglomerate called Waystar RoyCo. The family business is spearheaded by aging patriarch Logan Roy. As Logan's ability to lead the company becomes more and more uncertain, his adult children fight to outmaneuver their father and each other and to seize control. Each of the Roy children enters this fight for power, carrying baggage from their bizarre upbringings within this cold, dysfunctional family. Succession was nominated for the Emmy Award for Outstanding Drama Series for each of its 4 seasons and won the award 3 times. Susan Soon He Stanton joined the writers' room in the show's first season and continued to write for the show throughout its entire run. She has written for theater, television, and film. Succession was her first experience working in a television writer's room. She's also worked as a writer on the TV series Dead Ringers, Modern Love, Conversations with Friends, and The Baby. Stanton sat down with Austin Film Festival moderator R.B. Brenner to talk about what it was like bringing her playwriting experience into the writer's room and the challenge of writing in each character's specific voice. Succession clips courtesy of Home Box Office Inc.
So I sat in a panel yesterday, and you spoke of how each of certainly the Roy characters, each have a different cadence. And you talked about almost writing for them, of trying to tap into the musicality of that cadence. Can you just maybe pick a couple of Roys and talk about what are their cadences and how you wrote for that?
Yeah, so I think about them as musical instruments a little bit, and part of it has to do with power. I think, like I think in some ways we thought about Logan like the shark in Jaws, and you just don't want to show the shark too much, or it takes away the power of it. And I think there was a study of somebody a professor that looked at emails that he got from students, and they would be 3 paragraphs long, and he would write back. Like, okay, great, yeah, I handed the paper. And then he looked at an email where he sent it to his department head, and it was longer, and then the shorter reply. And so sometimes it's the more that you say is the less powerful person, and as opposed to just the person who's listening. I think it depends on the situation. And so sometimes we would look at who's talking and why, and what is the effect it's having in terms of like when is someone having the big sort of speech, and just playing with that, and it also having it be a way people's mind works. And so I think Shiv never wants to show her hand, and so she's kind of like a weaver. I think she says one thing, she says, she shows something else, and I think that their minds are often very facile. I think Kendall is almost like a waterfall. He's kind of in a tumult. He says the right things, he says the wrong things. Like you can sort of feel him struggling, like thinking, and it's like you almost feel the herky-jerkiness of that performance.
Great. So shall I talk, or will you?
Well, we want to hear your thoughts, of course, but you want to start off just hearing our 5 points?
Sure, you go.
Okay.
But I think the headline needs to be the weather, we're changing the cultural climate. But you go.
Okay,
For context, I'm talking to the Times about an op-ed, draft an alternative corporate manifesto, drop rapid reaction TEDx, like that.
Well, that's great.
It's cheesy as but I need people to see this was part of a coherent philosophy, not just punching an old guy in the nose. Yeah.
Right. That is in line with our thoughts. So,
well, I may as well say, on a dumb level, I'd like my Twitter to be off the hook. This could all get super earnest, so I was thinking of hitting up some BoJack guys, some of the Lampoon kids, just to smash that. Make my feet a little powder keg people need to check in with.
Like cool tweets to position you?
Yeah, that would be the straight-leg Chino way of putting it. Cool tweets. F you. No, I'm kidding. I know you guys are the best. Okay, sorry. I want to work with you, if you can work with me.
Connor, it's just like, oh man, like what crazy things can we make him say? It's always like the wrong choice. It's like a fruit machine just firing. Kieran was a real joy to write for Roman, because you can make him say literally anything, and it's like he's like a trumpet, and he just says these like very crazy, very funny things. But then there's other times where you pull him back, and then when he's being honest, it's generally very and vulnerable. It's very unadorned. It's often very simple. I think in terms of status, Tom was in a way one of my favorites. I mean, our Tom, we sometimes on The Room, we would call it, like, if we were having a tough time doing, like, we did the morning business storylines, and then we would have, like, Tom and Greg ice cream in the afternoon, and just, like, where can we put them? Like, what can happen to these men, like, in the romance for the ages? And that would be very fun. Like, when we had too much lunch, we could just focus on Tom and Greg. But I think for Tom, he's a really interesting character, because sometimes he's high status, sometimes he's low status. And when he feels like he's high status, he's really monstrous, sometimes like horrendous.
What the is that?
Oh, I guess they were ordering some for folks. I said, why not get you one?
Bodega sushi? Are you insane?
No, that's not me, that's Samson.
No, not Samson, Greg! Not Samson, not! I want you Gregging for me. You're busted back down to Greg tonight.
No.
Yeah, tonight my digestive system is basically part of the Constitution, okay? Microwave milk and ginger shots, American bottled water, and spaghetti and olive oil, okay? Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
So just playing with like, well, who is this man? And then trying to see how far we can take him in different scenarios. Like, can we let him feel things in his vulnerability with Shiv, and really let it actually feel like a real marriage, as complicated as it is. And then other times it's really goofy.
As a viewer, when I watched and thought about sort of how you might have to think about character arc, because particularly in The Family, it seemed like in some ways each character's arc is kind of like a chess match. So if one does this, that might cause another one to take a step back or be thwarted. So can you talk about the complexity of, since they're all sort of shooting for like this goal to some degree, how one character's move affects another character's arc?
Yeah, and I think it's tricky. I think it's one of those things of, in a way, it's I think why the show, we decided to have the show only be 4 seasons, was because I think we didn't want it to be too wheel turny. I think if it was 8 seasons, it's just, there's so much backstabbing. I think that Logan loves his children and the siblings love each other, but there's also so much happening. It's like an unstable environment. And so I think we would have all the different characters. We had a grid, so we had I'm like seeing the wall of the room in my mind, but we had a grid where we'd have, Logan, Kendall, we'd have everybody's names and then the episode titles, and it would kind of be their big actions. And sometimes we wouldn't know every single machination, but we're like, okay, this, for in season 1, for example, with Kendall, for which side are you on? It's like if Kendall had just done less, he probably would have won the day. And it's because he's just so worried that he's like, I have to win over everybody, and then he's not in the room in that critical moment. And so I think that we would have these big moments of, okay, somebody's at a big high or a big low, and then try to sort of almost visually place them, but also really think about their movements through the series.
If we wanted to halt proceedings until...
We're not halting proceedings, we're moving on.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I can do this. Dad, this is big. Look, I love my father. Okay, my father is a legend. I worship the ground he walks on. Nothing will ever detract from what he's built and what he's done. But he is currently unfit to run this company.
Speak up,
Not only
I
because
can't
of his
hear.
refusal to take the time to recover from serious health issues, but because every day he refuses to retire, he is one day closer to destroying his own legacy. He took on levels of debt that threatened the very existence of our firm. He is lining up deadweight acquisitions in a sector that he has a historic regard for, but which is a non-growth area. We face existential battles in scale, and he is facing precisely the wrong direction. He is making decisions for a future that he no longer understands, and we don't have time for missteps. What used to take 10, 2, 3 years, our entire ice cap will melt. He is gambling our last dollars at the track on a horse that's ready for the glue factory, and I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in him as CEO and chairman.
Frank Rich, who's New York Times journalist, would come in and was one of the producers and would sometimes sit in. So how would you talk about the degree to which to bring sort of current events, news into the show? Obviously, it became a little more front and center with the Jared Mencken character and the whole election.
Yeah, we sort of moved towards the election in season 4. Our writers, writers' rooms are all different days. I mean, we would work we'd have like a semi-working lunch. Our writers' room was often only 5 or 6 hours. I mean, some writers' rooms are, 8+ or with the lunch break. And we would have a lot of time. And part of it was that we would do a lot of research on our own. I don't believe we got a researcher until season 2 or 3. And so we had to be our own researchers and bring in ideas and bring in thoughts. And so we had a certain number of books that maybe we'd all sort of read, but we'd also try to become experts on different topics and bring in, as we sort of were moving towards different ideas. And so, for me, if it was like the board meeting, I would start trying to access different meetings if anything was online, or for the shareholders, I watched a lot of AGMs and different things like that. We would all read different books or chase different things. In season 1, I did a lot of research on cruise lines and talked to different experts. And so we would all kind of, in the mornings, at night, do our own work and then bring things in. And sometimes it was to pitch, and sometimes it was just so somebody had it. We would almost read a book and do a little bit of a book report of like, okay, here's the really salient things. Okay, everybody, we all have to read this book. Or maybe I'll read this book and just flag certain things. And one of our writers in the room, John Brown, he read like the entire Senate hearings for AT&T, or Facebook. He read the entire Facebook Senate hearings, and it was something like a 500-page just transcript, and just really dry. And he just sat down one night and he just cold porridged it and like went through the whole thing and read it. And we were like, mate, like, oh God, like he just read it and it was really boring. But that was the kind of texture that we were looking for. So and then we were able to then do, a bunch of research across different episodes. Like a good friend of mine is Swedish. And so I talked to her, and then even though like the episode of Norway wasn't mine, we would read different things, and I would talk to her and then say, okay, this is some of the structure, this is some of the culture, and then that would end up feeding in for a different writer.
You talked earlier about this interesting tonal shifting between sometimes heartbreaking tragedy and humor. Did you sometimes try to push it one way or the other, and then to see what felt right? Like, how did you try to do your knobs of the tone?
Yeah, I think that one thing we had to think about was trying to not let them be too likable. And I think that there were moments where we worried, is Roman becoming too human? Is he? Because you feel for him, right? You see his heartbreak, and we're with him, and so, but okay, well, this is the kid or this is the man who tried to mess with the mind of a child with $1 million for the baseball. Like that is, there's a lot of things that are horrendous about the family, and we had something that was up on the wall in the writers' room, where it's like they poison each other, they poison the world, and who these people actually are, and how their own kind of internal sicknesses have an enormous consequence, and they're in this tiny, dangerous bubble. And so I think we would try to humanize them, but at a certain point, it's like you have to remind everybody, so it was kind of like, okay, I think we're making him a little bit too likable, so we have to have him do something really, really despicable to cause the audience to, question it. And I think people sometimes are really hard on Shiv, especially with her romantic life, and it's so funny that I think this happens a lot in shows. I was thinking a lot about it with Breaking Bad, where people were so tough on Skylar versus Walt, and it's like, wait, what? How? That's really unfair. And I think it's like, okay, so Shiv, had an affair and then told her husband about it, admittedly on her wedding night, not great. But, Kendall, killed somebody, and like that, how is Shiv worse than Kendall? That feels incredibly, deeply wrong. And so it's interesting how I think people were willing to be more forgiving or less forgiving, sort of depending on the scenario.
I think it was in the Argestes episode where you actually see Logan strike Roman, which to me was like an acting out of something that you and the other siblings' reaction that implied a real like heavy backstory. Can you talk about those sort of thinking about backstory that isn't always expressed?
Yeah, I think we have to sort of, that's the thing with family, right? Where it's not necessarily that someone's going to then explain the whole thing because they remember it, and they also choose to remember it differently. And so that was a moment, you see Logan hitting Roman like pretty hard, and then it's referenced back, that moment is referenced in a later episode, and then Roman's just like, oh yeah, but I'm very hittable.
Come on, Dad. What are you sorry for? Sorry for ignoring Connor his whole life?
Bit strong.
Hitting Rome when he was a kid?
Oh, no. I mean, everyone hit me. I'm annoying.
Having Connor's mother locked up?
Can we not do a whole show trial here?
And you see him making something up for his dad, but it's disturbing because you're like, no, wait, we saw that. We saw him get hit, and we know that's something that happens. And I think that was something else in terms of hierarchy of Connor being, that kind of like the first pancake, and, the mental illness, or really it's not completely ever described in the show, but talking about what, it always felt very ominous, like what happened to Connor, like what happened to his mom. And I think that Shiv has this dynamic where she was the baby, and so it's like, well, she was never hit, right? She was never put under the same tough scrutiny as her brothers. They feel like she's the favorite, but then she feels like, she doesn't get the same shot because she's a woman, and so I think that there's different ways where they all have their different versions of truth, which is very much the same in the family. Like, I feel like different kids might feel resentful of their siblings for various reasons, and I think there's so many things where, within a family there are secrets, and so there are things that the kids will never know about Logan. The audience will never know, but we want to just feel the slivers of it. And so in Dundee, you sort of get a sense of a little bit of Logan's history and what happened with his sister Rose. And so we would talk about some of this backstory. We would talk about his childhood. We would talk about certain things, and then just try to see, okay, we're not interested in doing a time jump backwards.
So you mentioned Matthew being game for anything. I believe you came up with the idea that he would eat the chicken off of Logan's plate. Talk about that.
Oh, yeah. I think we talked a lot about different power strategies. So that was a moment where, you see Tom in season 1, or in the pilot, trying to buy a watch for Logan and being very nervous. I think he's often trying to figure out how to please, his father-in-law. So that was a moment where we called it like the chicken power play, and it was a very Pharaoh moment where he just grabs the chicken, and it kind of weirdly works.
I don't know. I think it's getting to people, Dad. The tension.
He ate my chicken.
Mm-hmm.
So what next? Stick his into my potato salad?
In Retired Janitors, he takes him into the bathroom, and it's incredibly awkward, but it's also very real, where it's like a moment, and we talk about relationships in our real lives, and one of the writers was sharing, a moment with his father-in-law, and those kinds of like awkward vulnerability, like, well, we are a family, but I am terrified of this man, and like, what does it all mean, and trying to mix in real kind of humanness, or especially with a very powerful but frail man in some ways. Like, he feels like a giant, but also, like different health concerns that you sort of show little slivers of as well.
So 7 years seems like it's a long time to work on one project. I'm curious, was there great continuity in the writer's room, or people coming in and out and new voices?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, we had a little bit of a delay because of COVID. So maybe it was like 6 years, but certainly like the longest continuous project I've ever worked on. And, I think it was exciting. I think we had I would say like 2/3 of our room, maybe more, stayed the same throughout, and then we would have a few different writers every year. I think that's pretty normal. I feel like in a way it was nice because there was a different energy flow. Like, it wasn't exactly the same people every year, but we had a really strong core. And I think the thing with the show running is to be a good showrunner, you need a very clear idea of what the show is in your mind, but also be open to what other writers are bringing in and having different people come in that can surprise you or with really, really different ideas. And I think also we had a mixed group of people in terms of whose parents were together, whose parents were divorced, or who was in our show of writers who was married or who, if anyone had been divorced. We were kind of all just talking about who had, I think we actually all had, I'm trying to think, I think all the writers, weirdly, we all had siblings. That wasn't a requirement for the show, but that was just what happened. And so we all could bring in those sorts of stories as well of like sibling, like just what it's like with our siblings. But I had spent decades writing plays, actually self-producing plays. Theater really helped me because it, and I think making short films, because it gives you those muscles of problem solving and just perseverance and pushing through into writing. So when somebody does give you that chance, like you're ready for it, right? Because you've been building up towards that. It's kind of like you're accumulating your skills, you're accumulating the writing, you're strengthening and understanding your voice. And then when you finally have when you've gotten to the right level, you have the right sample, then you get a chance. And when you get the chance, you've already gotten yourself as far as along as you can be in that moment. And so then you're able to move a lot faster. I truly didn't know what the audience would be, just because I think the first couple episodes as well, it took people a minute to kind of figure out what the show was. And because we're an ensemble show, it takes time, I think. Like I'm really impressed that it found the audience that it did, because the show does take work. The language is very heightened. There's a lot of ideas. There's a lot of ways that people are challenged. But I think it speaks to just how smart audiences are. And I love people talking to me about this show, because they'll say, oh, it's just like my family. And that means a lot, because they're able to kind of enter in that the circumstances could be very different. But, I think every time a parent passes and there's an estate, and even if it's a small thing and people fighting, there's complex tragedies happening and secrets and dynamics happening in every single family. And so I think it's been really nice to hear people that it resonates with people as well in their own worlds.
On Story is brought to you in part by the Alice Kleberg Reynolds Foundation, a Texas family providing innovative funding since 1979. On Story is also brought to you by Bogle Family Vineyards, 6th-generation farmers and 3rd-generation winemakers based in Clarksburg, California. Makers of sustainably grown wines that are a reflection of their family values since 1968. The project is supported in part by the Texas Commission on the Arts. This show is produced by myself, Barbara Morgan, Elizabeth Mims, and Emily Locke. Our associate producer is Freya Neely, and our editor is Rishi Bajekal. Music is by Brian Ramos. Copywriting by Mazzy Smallwood. Production assistance comes from Dennis Moniger, Travis Kennedy Sound, Phil Mazzetti, and KUT 90.5 in Austin. Go to austinfilmfestival.com to learn more about Austin Film Festival and Conference each October. Until next time, I'm Barbara Morgan, and this has been Austin Film Festival's On Story.